The rain had already soaked through Marcus Hale's thin jacket when he heard the voice behind him, soft, trembling, almost swallowed by the cold night air. "Can you walk me home?" she whispered. Marcus stopped mid-step beneath the flickering streetlight outside the small diner on Willow Street. The night smelled like wet pavement and burnt coffee drifting from the diner's open door. He turned slowly, confused, tired eyes searching the sidewalk. A young woman stood there, hugging herself as if the wind itself might shatter her. For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Life had taught him to be careful with strangers, especially at night, especially when you had a 6-year-old son waiting at home. But something about the way she stood there, small, uncertain, almost lost, made his chest tighten. And maybe you felt that moment before. That strange pause when life places a decision quietly in your hands. Walk away and protect your own fragile world, or stay and risk letting someone else into it. If you were standing there that night, what would you do? Marcus was 38, a single father living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. His days were spent washing dishes in the diner behind him, and his nights were spent helping his son Noah with homework at a wobbly kitchen table. Since his wife Hannah had died 3 years earlier from a sudden aneurysm, the world had become a long series of quiet struggles. Rent notices, school lunches, broken appliances he couldn't afford to replace. So strangers were not something Marcus usually had time for, yet he couldn't ignore the girl. Her name, he soon learned as they began walking down the dim sidewalk, was Sarah Whitaker. She looked no older than 25. Her long blonde hair clung damply to her face, and her eyes carried the hollow exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in days. She didn't explain much at first, only that she needed to get to a neighborhood about 6 blocks away and didn't feel safe walking alone. Marcus walked beside her silently, his hands shoved deep in his pockets to hide the cold. The city around them was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens late on weekday nights in small American towns. Streetlights buzzed faintly. A train horn echoed somewhere in the distance. Sarah glanced at him several times like she wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the courage. Marcus noticed the way she studied his face, like she was searching for something familiar. He wondered if she was scared or maybe remembering. After a few minutes, she finally spoke again, not loudly, not confidently, just carefully. She asked if he had always worked at the diner. Marcus nodded. Nearly 12 years, he explained quietly, first as a cook, then washing dishes when the restaurant downsized. Jobs were scarce in their Ohio town, and he had taken whatever he could keep. Sarah listened closely. Then she asked if he had a child. Marcus felt a faint smile creep across his tired face. He told her about Noah, about how the boy loved dinosaurs and drew them on every scrap of paper he could find, about how Noah insisted their tiny apartment was actually a prehistoric research lab. For the first time that night, Sarah smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carries sadness inside it. They turned onto a quieter street lined with old brick houses. Porch lights glowed warmly through the rain. That's when Sarah suddenly stopped walking. Marcus turned, confused. She looked at him in a way that made his stomach tighten, like someone finally finding the courage to open a door they had kept locked for years. Her voice trembled when she spoke. She told him she had been searching for him. Marcus blinked. Searching for him? He shook his head slowly, certain there had to be some mistake. But Sarah simply reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded newspaper clipping, the edges worn from years of being carried around. Marcus recognized the photo instantly. It had been taken almost 20 years earlier. A teenage boy standing beside a police officer. That boy was him. And suddenly the past rushed back like a storm breaking open the sky. Marcus had been 18 when it happened. A freezing winter night. A bus station bench. A frightened runaway girl who had been crying quietly beside him. He had bought her a hot chocolate with the last few dollars he had and stayed with her until the police arrived. He never knew her story, never knew where she went afterward. At the time, it had seemed like a small moment, just kindness, but life moved on. Hard years followed, marriage, fatherhood, loss. He had forgotten about that night. Sarah's voice cracked softly as she explained. That runaway girl had been her. She told him how she had been fleeing an abusive home, how Marcus had been the first person who had treated her like she mattered, how that single act of kindness had given her the courage to trust the officers who eventually helped her enter foster care. Her life had changed after that. Years later, she had gone to college, then medical school, and now, after months of searching, she had returned to the town where it all started, just to find the man who had unknowingly saved her life. Marcus stood frozen beneath the streetlight, rain dripping from his sleeves. For a long moment he couldn't speak. All those years of struggle, of wondering if anything he did truly mattered. And somehow that tiny moment had changed someone's entire future. Sarah wiped her eyes gently before reaching into her bag again. This time she handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter and a job offer. She explained that she had recently joined a nonprofit medical foundation opening a small clinic in town. They needed someone reliable to manage the facility operations. Someone kind, someone trustworthy, someone who understood what it meant to help strangers. Marcus felt his throat tighten. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a locked door. It felt like a second chance. As they stood there in the rain, two lives quietly reconnecting after nearly 2 decades, Marcus realized something powerful. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness echoes longer than we ever imagine. And sometimes the people we help when we have nothing become the ones who help us when we need it most. Before the story ends, tell me something in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment where a small act of kindness changed someone's life? Or your own? And if this story touched your heart even a little, please consider liking the video, sharing it with someone who needs a reminder about kindness, and subscribing for more stories that remind us how powerful simple compassion can be. Read